Hello everybody and welcome back to our Bible study today. 1 Kings chapter 3, and there's an outline on the screen to all the information that we're going to be talking about, and you can also download it on our website. If you want to go to tobelikechrist.com, you'll be able to find a link to that down in the description. When on our timeline did the events of 1 Kings 3 take place? Well, we're talking about events that occurred in the early years of the reign of King Solomon. Solomon was king for 40 years in total, 1 Kings 11 tells us. The timeline that we're using places at approximately 1015 to 975 BC. We've got three key characters today in two groups. So first of all, Solomon. He's the son of David and the son of Bathsheba. He became the third king over Israel and Judah. Now we're going to talk also about two prostitutes. So these are two women who came to Solomon to settle a dispute. It's a really interesting situation that we're going to talk about in our outline. These women both claimed to be the true mother of one child. Our where section is also interesting today. First of all, we're going to talk about Jerusalem. We've been talking about that city for a while because it's the capital of Solomon's kingdom. Then the high places. Now this is somewhat new. I don't think we've mentioned this too many times yet in the Old Testament, but it'll come up several times throughout the Old Testament, especially in the books of the Kings. These high places were locations that were probably on the tops of hills, that's why they're called the high places, where altars were built and sacrifices were offered to the Lord. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us a whole lot about these places. It doesn't tell us specifically how these places were designated. It's possible that some of these sites were originally chosen as holy places by the nations who inhabited the Promised Land before the Israelites conquered it. Our final location is Gibeon. Gibeon was considered to be the great high place. And this may have been due to the fact that the tabernacle was located in Gibeon, according to 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 29. As far as I understand, there's not like a complete map that shows where all of these high places were. They're just references being kind of scattered throughout the land. That takes us over to page number 2, to our outline, two sections today, verses 1 through 15 and 16 through 28. So this one divides down pretty evenly. Let's talk about verses 1 through 15 first. The title is God Gifts Solomon Wisdom. So if you ever heard about Solomon being one of the wisest or the wisest man on earth, that's one thing that he became very famous for around the world during his time. He's still famous for it. This is how that happened. How did he become so wise? Let's talk about it. Solomon made an alliance with the king of Egypt, and he actually married his daughter, Pharaoh's daughter. And this was one of many foreign women that Solomon would marry. And remember that because it's going to be a problem towards the end of Solomon's reign. Now, in Solomon's day, this early part of his reign, since the temple hadn't been built, the people offered sacrifices to God at these high places. Now, according to God's law, this wasn't ideal. The general rule was that sacrifices were supposed to be offered at the tabernacle. But we do see some, like judges, for example, like Samuel, going to the high places. So it seems like since the religious system had kind of fallen apart, maybe there was some tolerance on God's part for this. It's not exactly clear. We're not told. It's one of those situations where we're not exactly told what God thought of it during these early years of the kingdom. We're told that Solomon loved the Lord with all of his heart, but he also sacrificed at the high places. When Solomon was at Gibeon, which again was the great high place, God appeared to him in a dream, and he asked him a question. He said, quote, "Ask what I shall give you." So he basically just wrote him a blank check and said, "What would you like from me? I'm willing to offer you something." Now Solomon wisely asked for wisdom to lead his nation. And this request really pleased God. God granted him a, quote, "wise and discerning mind," and told him that no one on earth was going to be as wise as him. He told him that since he didn't ask for like money or for a long life or for honor, that God was going to give him those things anyway, in addition to his wisdom. God promised to give Solomon a long life so long as he kept God's commands and led the nation faithfully. So after Solomon woke up from this vision or this dream, he returned to Jerusalem, offered sacrifices at the Ark of the Covenant, and made a feast for his servants. And so that's how Solomon became so wise. That's somewhat famous in the Old Testament. Now here's another famous story. We've talked about how Solomon became wise. Now how does he put it into application? That's verses 16 through 28. Solomon's wisdom and the disputed baby. One day, two prostitutes came to Solomon with a dispute. They had each given birth to children around the same time, but one of the babies unfortunately had died. Now, I'll read this, and I've entitled the first woman, the accuser, as woman 1, and then the second woman who's being accused is woman 2. This is surprisingly hard to write down in an outline. I tried to explain it once in a sermon, and I realized how mixed up I was getting. So woman 1 and woman 2, we'll just go with that. So here we go. I think I'm just going to read it so I don't flub it up. Woman number 1 accused woman number 2 of stealing her child during the night. Woman 1 said that woman 2 accidentally rolled over on her child during the night because the baby was sleeping in the same bed, and she smothered it and killed it. Woman 2, this is the accusation, when woman 2 realized that her son was dead and noticed that woman 1 was asleep on the bed in the same room, she swapped the children, giving her child to woman 1 and taking the living child for herself. So that's the accusation, that woman 2 swapped her dead child with woman 1's child, and now woman 2 has come to accuse this woman before Solomon. Okay, now for woman 2's story. Woman 2 denied this accusation. She stated that the dead child was the child of woman 1, and now woman 1 was trying to steal her child, who was still alive, out of jealousy that she didn't have a child anymore. Okay, so what is Solomon going to do? I mean, how on earth does he solve this dilemma? How on earth does he know whose baby is whose baby? Well, Solomon proposed a solution. He said, you know what? I've got an idea. We'll cut this baby in half, and we'll give half to woman 1. We'll give half to woman 2. Doesn't that sound like a great idea? Solomon, though he wasn't actually planning to do this, but it shows the wisdom that God gave him. He wisely proposed it to see how the women would respond. Woman 1, who was the accuser, she was all for it. She's like, yeah, sure, this sounds like a great idea. I'll take half the baby, cut the baby in half. But woman 2 wasn't in agreement with that. She actually declared that rather than the child being killed, she wanted the child to be given to woman 1. And this gave Solomon his answer. He realized that woman 2 was the true mother. She was the one who really cared about the child, and he commanded the servants to give the baby to woman 2. So that leads us directly into our application. What was it? How did Solomon discern the identity of the true mother? It was a test of love, right? Wasn't it? The true mother loved her child enough that if it meant keeping her child alive, she was willing to give up her claim and her right to raise her own child. So in application, now it's your turn. You have to sit in judgment between two stories. Jesus comes to you with a story, and the devil comes to you with a story. And the devil can be very convincing at times. These stories are about what's ultimately true, the way that you should live in light of that truth, and what's going to make you happy in the end. How are you going to decide? How are you going to discern which one's true? I think you could do it by the same criteria, and that is love. The devil is a selfish liar, like woman 1, who's never done anything for you, who wants to see you ruined. In contrast, Jesus came to the earth and died for you, to save you, because he loves you. He was willing to give up his rights to be in heaven with God, to come down to this earth of pain and suffering and sorrow, and to be crucified. He was willing to die so that you could live. Just like woman 2 was willing to give up her rights to keep her child alive. So now you have to make the choice about what's true and the way that you're going to live in light of that truth.